The divorce papers had barely dried when Jason and I moved into Sycamore Heights. It was supposed to be our fresh start, a quiet suburban community with tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors. After 2 years of fighting for custody and splitting assets, I had finally secured full custody of my 15-year-old son. We both needed this change. The realtor had mentioned that the neighborhood had a homeowners association. That did not bother me. Rules meant order, and order meant peace. I had read through the covenant before signing, standard restrictions about lawn maintenance, exterior paint colors, and holiday decorations. Nothing unreasonable. The monthly fee covered community landscaping and pool maintenance. It seemed like a fair trade for living in such a well-kept development. On our third day, while unpacking boxes in the garage, a shadow fell across the driveway. I turned to find a man standing there, arms crossed over his chest. He wore what appeared to be a security uniform, dark blue shirt with patches on the shoulders, matching pants with a stripe down the side, and a utility belt complete with a holstered object that made my stomach tighten. He introduced himself with practiced authority. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Brad Keller, head of neighborhood security for Sycamore Heights." He extended a hand that I reluctantly shook. "Just wanted to welcome you to the community and make sure you received your copy of the regulations." I nodded, gesturing to the folder on my workbench. "Yes, thank you. The agent provided everything." Brad smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Excellent. We take our community standards very seriously here. I personally ensure that everyone follows the rules." He glanced at a skateboard leaning against our garage wall. "You might want to remind your son that skateboarding is only permitted in designated areas. The community park has a skate area for that purpose." I found it odd that he already knew about Jason, but I kept my expression neutral. "I will let him know." Brad lingered, scanning our half-unpacked garage with critical eyes. "Your garbage bins should be stored out of street view by tomorrow evening. Section 4, Paragraph 2 of the Covenant." With that, he handed me a business card with his name and Sycamore Heights Security printed beneath a badge-shaped logo. I thanked him and watched as he walked away with measured steps, his posture unnaturally rigid. That evening, I mentioned the encounter to Jason over dinner. He rolled his eyes. "Already met Officer Wannabe. He stopped me this morning when I was checking out the neighborhood, told me I was suspicious for looking at houses." My fork paused midway to my mouth. "He confronted you for walking." Jason shrugged, said he was documenting my movements or something. Then he lectured me about taking a shortcut through some garden. I did not even know it was off-limits. There is no sign. 2 days later, I found a neon yellow notice taped to our mailbox. "Warning. Improper storage of recreational equipment. Please remove skateboard from front porch within 24 hours to avoid further action." I crumpled the paper, irritated not by the rule itself but by the aggressive tone. That afternoon, I spotted Brad patrolling the street, clipboard in hand, that same object still holstered at his hip. With a closer look, I realized with rising alarm that it appeared to be a firearm. At the monthly HOA meeting, I raised my hand during the open forum. "I have a question about our neighborhood security. Does Brad Keller have authorization to carry a weapon while patrolling?" Patricia Wilson, the HOA president, a thin woman with perfectly styled gray hair, dismissed my concern with a wave. "Brad is a dedicated volunteer who takes our community safety very seriously. He has proper training for all equipment he carries." "But is he actually employed by the HOA? Does he have law enforcement credentials?" Patricia's smile tightened. "Brad has been with us for 3 years. He is simply a concerned resident who volunteers his time to keep us all safe. We are quite fortunate to have him." I left the meeting unsatisfied, watching as several residents approached Brad afterward, speaking in hushed tones while glancing in my direction. Something felt wrong, but I could not put my finger on exactly what. All I knew was that behind Brad's badge and authoritative stance, something unsettling lurked, and my son and I were now directly in his line of sight. The morning started with another notice, this one taped directly to our front door. "Final warning, unauthorized modifications to landscaping. Remove non-approved plants immediately or face fines of $100 per day." I stared at the paper in confusion. The only change I had made was planting 3 small rose bushes beside the front steps, plants identical to those in several neighbors' yards. I took a photo of the notice with my phone, adding it to a growing album I had started titled Brad. That afternoon, Jason came home from school visibly upset. He slammed his backpack on the kitchen counter, his face flushed. "What happened?" I asked, setting aside the work documents I had been reviewing. "Your neighborhood rent-a-cop happened." Jason opened the refrigerator with unnecessary force. "I was walking home with Miguel from down the street. We cut through the empty lot because it was raining. Suddenly, Brad pulls up in his car with the yellow flashers going and starts yelling at us." My stomach tightened. What did he say? That we were trespassing on private property, called it a serious offense, and said he could have us arrested. Jason's voice cracked slightly. He took pictures of us with his phone and said he was documenting our criminal behavior for his records. I felt my face growing hot. "Did he threaten you?" Jason avoided my eyes. "He said if he catches me again, he will call in backup and have me processed for juvenile detention." He finally looked up. "Mom, does he even have the authority to do that?" "Absolutely not," I said firmly, though uncertainty gnawed at me. "He is not a real police officer. He cannot arrest anyone." The next day, I was pruning the contested rose bushes when I witnessed Brad across the street. He had cornered 8-year-old Emma Wilson, the HOA president's granddaughter, who was riding her bicycle. Even from a distance, I could see the child's frightened expression as Brad loomed over her, gesturing wildly at the sidewalk. "You cannot ride here," his voice carried clearly across the quiet street. "This is a pedestrian walkway only. Where are your parents? Do they know you are breaking community regulations?" The little girl's lower lip trembled. I immediately put down my gardening shears and crossed the street. "Is there a problem here?" I asked, placing myself between Brad and Emma. Brad straightened, his hand automatically drifting toward his hip. "This is not your concern. I am handling a violation." "She is 8 years old and riding a bicycle on a sidewalk. There is no violation." I turned to Emma. "Sweetheart, why do not you head home now? Tell your grandmother I said hello." The child pedaled away quickly. Brad stepped closer to me, close enough that I could smell the artificial mint on his breath. "I would advise you not to interfere with security operations," he said quietly. "Your status in this community is already under review." "What does that mean?" I demanded. "It means people are watching, people notice troublemakers." He tapped the badge on his chest. "And I notice everything." That evening, I emailed the HOA board again, detailing Brad's confrontation with Jason and Emma. The response came from Patricia Wilson within the hour. "Mr. Keller has reported multiple violations from your household. Perhaps focusing on compliance rather than criticizing our security procedures would be more productive." I was folding laundry when a knock at the door interrupted me. It was Helen Garcia from 3 houses down. We had exchanged pleasantries, but never really spoken at length. "I do not have much time," she said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "But I saw what happened with Emma today. I just wanted to tell you to be careful with Brad." "What do you mean?" I asked. Helen lowered her voice. "Brad is not who he says he is. Last year, he followed my teenage daughter home from the pool, claimed she was violating curfew at 7 p.m. When my husband confronted him, Brad threatened to have our pool access revoked." She stepped back. "Just watch yourself and your son." Before I could ask more questions, Helen hurried away, leaving me standing in the doorway with a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. After Helen's warning, I could not sleep. At 2 a.m., I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I typed Brad Keller Security into the search bar. Nothing relevant appeared. I refined my search with our city name and neighborhood security. Still nothing. On a hunch, I tried Brad Keller impersonating officer. A hit, an article from a community newspaper in Fairview County, 30 miles away. The small headline read, "Local HOA dismisses volunteer after complaints about conduct." The article was vague, mentioning only that a community security volunteer had been asked to step down after numerous residents expressed concerns about overzealous enforcement tactics. I dug deeper. A community forum for a development called Oakwood Estates contained multiple threads about a power-tripping security guy who had been terrorizing residents. One post included a blurry photo. Unmistakably Brad, 2 years younger but wearing the same type of uniform. By morning, I had compiled a folder of information. Brad had no law enforcement background. His previous job was at a warehouse until he was fired for behavioral issues. He had never served in the military despite the military-style patches on his uniform. And most disturbing, the badge he wore so proudly was available for purchase online for $29.99, listed as a costume accessory. Over the next few days, I quietly approached neighbors, asking casual questions about their experiences with Brad. The stories poured out once people realized they were not alone. "He wrote me up for having my garden hose visible," said Mr. Jenkins from across the street. "He told my husband our American flag was hung incorrectly and threatened to report us for disrespecting national symbols," said Mrs. Abernathy. "He follows my daughter home from the bus stop, says he is ensuring she arrives safely, but it feels creepy," confided Ms. Lopez. Each conversation confirmed what I suspected. Brad was a fraud who had somehow gained legitimate authority through fear and manipulation. On Wednesday afternoon, I took photos of Brad's car, a personal vehicle inappropriately equipped with amber warning lights and magnetic door signs reading "Security Patrol." I documented the fake badge, the non-regulation uniform, the holster. As I snapped a final photo of his license plate, a shadow fell over me. "What do you think you are doing?" Brad stood there, hands on his belt, feet planted wide in a stance I recognized from police shows. I straightened, refusing to be intimidated. "Taking pictures, last I checked, that is still legal on a public street." "Not when you are harassing a security officer. I could press charges for interfering with my duties." His right hand moved to rest on his holster. "I strongly suggest you delete those photos immediately." I held my phone tightly. "No." His face flushed. "You do not understand the position you are putting yourself in." "I understand exactly what is happening here, Brad. Or should I say, Mr. Keller from Oakwood Estates? They kicked you out for the same behavior you are exhibiting here." For a moment he looked genuinely stunned. Then his expression hardened. "You have been warned. What happens next is on you." He stalked back to his car and drove away, but not before I noticed his hands were shaking. That night, I compiled everything I had discovered: photos, testimonies, the article from Fairview County, screenshots from the Oakwood Estates Forum. I created a document titled "The Truth About Our Neighborhood's Security Officer," and prepared to email it to every resident on the HOA mailing list. Before I could send it, Jason appeared in the doorway of my home office. His face was pale. "Mom, he followed me home from Miguel's house. The whole way. Driving right behind me at like 2 miles per hour with his yellow lights on. When I stopped to see what he wanted, he just stared at me and wrote something in his notebook." I closed my laptop, fury building inside me. "Did he say anything to you?" "Just that I was out past curfew. There is no curfew here, is there?" "No, Jason, there is not." I pulled him into a hug, feeling him trembling slightly. "This ends now." I reopened my laptop and hit send on the email. Within minutes, my phone began lighting up with responses. The neighborhood was finally waking up. The emergency HOA meeting was standing room only. I stood at the microphone in the community center, facing the board members who sat behind a long table, Patricia Wilson in the center. Brad was positioned off to the side, arms crossed, a storm brewing on his face. "For months, we have been terrorized by someone with no legal authority," I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "Brad Keller has been impersonating a security officer, threatening residents, particularly children and teenagers, and carrying what appears to be a weapon without proper licensing." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Patricia Wilson tapped her gavel. "These are serious allegations without proper—" "I have proof," I interrupted, holding up a folder. Documentation of every incident, testimonies from over a dozen residents, and evidence of Mr. Keller's termination from Oakwood Estates for similar behavior. Additionally, I have confirmation that his badge is a costume prop purchased online. Someone in the back of the room shouted, "Let her speak!" Others joined in. I noticed a resident holding up her phone, recording everything. Brad moved toward the microphone, but several residents physically blocked his path. "The board has been negligent," I continued. "You have given authority to an individual who is fundamentally unqualified and potentially dangerous. This stops today, or I will be forced to take legal action against the HOA for endangering residents, particularly minors." The meeting dissolved into chaos. Patricia Wilson adjourned without resolution, but the damage was done. The recording of my speech was shared across neighborhood messaging platforms within hours. That night, Brad parked across from our house, amber lights flashing rhythmically. He remained there until 3 a.m. The next night he returned, and the next. I filed a police report, but the officer who took my statement was not encouraging. "Unless he makes a direct threat or trespasses on your property, there is not much we can do. It is not illegal to park on a public street, even if it is intimidating." Despite the official response, a shift had occurred in the neighborhood. Residents began texting me when they spotted Brad patrolling. Some even parked their cars near our house in a show of solidarity. A petition demanding Brad's removal gathered over 100 signatures in 2 days. The HOA board released a statement acknowledging community concerns and promising to review security protocols. It was bureaucratic nonsense designed to buy time, but the pressure was building. On Friday night, Jason went to his room early, exhausted from the stress. I sat in the living room, reading but distracted, when headlights swept across our front windows. Brad's car had returned. I watched through the blinds as he parked and exited his vehicle. Instead of sitting in his car as usual, he began walking along the perimeter of our property. My heart raced as he moved to the side of the house, disappearing from view. I crept through the darkened house to Jason's room. Through his window, I could see Brad standing in our side yard looking up, looking directly at my son's bedroom window. I burst through our front door. "What do you think you are doing?" I shouted. Brad turned, startled. "Neighborhood patrol. There have been reports of suspicious activity." "On my property, looking into my son's window. Get out of my yard right now, or I am calling the police." He took a step toward me. "I do not think you understand the consequences of making an enemy of security personnel. Things happen in neighborhoods, cars get vandalized, property gets damaged. Would be a shame if something happened because you would not cooperate." The threat hung in the air between us. I pulled out my phone. "I am recording this, Brad. Say that again for the camera." He backed away, returning to his car. As he drove off, I noticed my hands were shaking. I went inside and hugged Jason, who had awakened from the commotion. "It is going to be okay," I promised him, though I was no longer certain that was true. Saturday evening arrived with a rare sense of calm. Brad had not been seen all day, and Jason seemed less anxious than he had been in weeks. Over dinner, he pushed his spaghetti around his plate. "Can I go for a walk, just around the block?" he asked cautiously. "I have been stuck inside forever." My instinct was to say no, but I saw the plea in his eyes. He was 15, not 5. "Of course you can," I said, working to keep my voice casual. "Just keep your phone on." "I will be back in 20 minutes, he promised, already heading for the door. "Just need some air." I watched from the window as he walked down our driveway, hands in his pockets, shoulders finally relaxed. I returned to the kitchen to clean up, the simple domesticity of washing dishes a welcome distraction. 17 minutes later, I heard shouting. The plate I was rinsing shattered in the sink as I bolted for the door, bare feet slapping against the tile, then the concrete of our driveway, then the asphalt of the street. I followed the sounds to the community storage shed near the neighborhood entrance. What I saw froze my blood. Brad stood with his legs apart in a shooting stance, an actual gun pointed directly at my son's chest. Jason was backed against the shed wall, hands raised, face white with terror. "Do not move," Brad was shouting. "I caught you breaking into community property. Stay where you are." "I was just sitting on the bench." Jason's voice was high with fear. "I did not touch anything." "I saw you trying the door. Do not lie to me." Neighbors were emerging from their homes, drawn by the commotion. Someone gasped. Another person shouted for Brad to put the gun down. I moved forward slowly, hands visible. "Brad," I said, working to keep my voice steady, "please lower your weapon. That is my son." Brad's eyes darted toward me, then back to Jason. He was attempting to break into the storage shed. I caught him in the act of vandalism. "He was taking a walk, Brad. Put the gun down now." "I am authorized to use necessary force to protect community property," Brad insisted, though I could see sweat beading on his forehead. "You are pointing a loaded weapon at a minor," I said, edging closer. "There are a dozen witnesses. This is aggravated assault." Mr. Jenkins from across the street had his phone up, clearly recording. Mrs. Abernathy was already on her phone with what I prayed was 911. Brad's hand trembled slightly. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. He was breaking the rules. Even if that were true, which it is not, no rule justifies threatening a child with a gun. I was close enough now to see the make of the weapon, a real handgun, not a fake. I heard sirens in the distance. Brad heard them too, his eyes widened. "This is a security matter," he insisted, voice rising. "The police have no jurisdiction in HOA enforcement." Even as he said it, 2 police cruisers rounded the corner, lights flashing. 4 officers emerged, weapons drawn. "Police, drop your weapon immediately," one shouted. Brad froze, caught between his delusion and reality. "I am security. I am authorized personnel." "Drop the weapon now." Time seemed to suspend as Brad stood there, guns still pointed at my terrified son, police officers advancing with their own weapons trained on him. The neighborhood watched in collective held breath. Finally, something in Brad broke. He lowered the gun slowly and placed it on the ground. 2 officers rushed forward, securing the weapon while the others forced Brad to the ground and handcuffed him. As they led him toward the patrol car, he kept repeating, "I am authorized security. Check with the HOA president. This is a mistake." I ran to Jason, wrapping him in my arms as he collapsed against me, his body shaking with sobs. Over his shoulder, I watched as the self-appointed protector of our community was placed in the back of a police car, his false authority finally stripped away. The police station hummed with activity as I sat with Jason on a bench, a shock blanket around his shoulders. An officer had just finished taking our statements, and now we waited while they processed Brad. Detective Rivera, a woman with kind eyes and no-nonsense posture, sat across from us. "We found several concerning items in Mr. Keller's possession," she said, consulting her notes. "An unregistered firearm, multiple false identification cards, including one identifying him as a federal security consultant. A list of residents with detailed notes about their daily routines, focusing particularly on teenagers and single women." My stomach turned. How was he allowed to terrorize an entire neighborhood for so long? "That is what we are trying to determine," she replied. "We have officers interviewing your HOA board members now. Preliminary findings suggest they never ran a background check, never verified his credentials, and gave him access to private resident information." "Will he be charged?" I asked, my arm tight around Jason. "Multiple felony counts, impersonating an officer, aggravated assault, unlawful possession of a firearm, menacing, endangering a minor." She closed her notebook. "He will not be returning to your neighborhood." The news spread like wildfire. By morning, local stations were running the story. "Self-appointed security officer arrested after holding teen at gunpoint." Video footage from neighbors' phones played on repeat. Brad with his gun drawn, police taking him down, my tearful reunion with Jason. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, but this time, residents were not interested in hearing excuses. Patricia Wilson faced a crowd of furious neighbors, her usual composure shattered. We had no idea he was carrying a real weapon, she insisted. He told us it was a non-lethal deterrent for emergencies only. Did you ever ask to see permits? Someone shouted. Did you ever check his background? We trusted his references, Patricia replied weakly. What references? I stood up. I found evidence he was fired from Oakwood Estates. Did you contact them? Her silence was damning. Within a week, I had retained an attorney and filed a civil lawsuit against the HOA for negligence, failure to perform due diligence, and reckless endangerment. Following my lead, 7 other families filed similar suits. As the legal process began, more disturbing information emerged. Brad had a history of filing frivolous lawsuits against local governments. He had been investigated twice for stalking. He had never served in law enforcement but had been rejected from 3 police academies for psychological concerns. Most alarming was the discovery that Brad had created detailed files on several teenagers in the neighborhood, including Jason. Police found photos, movement logs, and notations about suspicious behaviors, normal adolescent activities like gathering with friends or taking shortcuts through the neighborhood. The psychological toll on Jason was significant. He started therapy twice weekly, working through panic attacks and hypervigilance. For the first few weeks, he refused to leave the house alone. His therapist, Dr. Malhotra, was patient and understanding. Recovery from trauma takes time, she explained during a parent consultation. But Jason is resilient. With support, he will work through this. Small victories emerged. Jason sleeping through the night without nightmares. Jason walking to the mailbox alone. Jason agreeing to meet friends at the community center, though still texting me his location every 30 minutes. One evening, a knock at our door revealed Patricia Wilson, standing alone without her usual board member entourage. I came to apologize, she said, her voice subdued. Not as HOA president, but as a grandmother who nearly saw her neighbor's child hurt because of my negligence. She handed me an envelope. My letter of resignation, effective immediately, and a personal note for Jason if he is willing to read it. I accepted it with mixed emotions. Accountability is a start, I said, but this should never have happened. She nodded, eyes downcast. No, it should not have. As she turned to leave, she added, the board is settling all lawsuits without contest. It is the least we can do. As Patricia walked away, I felt the first real sense that justice was finally in motion. 4 months after the incident, Sycamore Heights had transformed. The entire HOA board had resigned, replaced by residents who campaigned on platforms of transparency and reasonable enforcement. The lawsuit settlements funded not only therapy for affected families, but also new community programs focused on actual safety rather than control. Brad remained in custody, denied bail due to the severity of his charges and concerns about community safety. His preliminary hearing had revealed even more disturbing evidence: notebooks filled with detailed surveillance of residents, elaborate fantasies about authority, and plans to establish his own private security company with himself as chief. Local news stations contacted me for interviews. Initially, I declined, wanting to protect Jason's privacy. But as similar stories emerged from other communities, I recognized the importance of speaking out. The morning of the interview, Jason surprised me. I want to go with you, he said over breakfast. Not to be on camera, but to be there. Are you sure? I asked. There is no pressure. He nodded. Dr. Malhotra says that reclaiming my story is part of healing, and maybe it will help other kids who are being bullied by people like Brad. The segment aired on the evening news, Neighborhood Tyranny, when HOAs go too far. I spoke carefully about the systematic failures that had allowed one individual to terrorize an entire community. This was never about enforcing legitimate rules, I explained to the reporter. This was about power, control, and intimidation. The real failure was institutional, a board that empowered an unstable individual and ignored residents' concerns until someone nearly died. The story went viral, connecting us with similar cases nationwide. I received emails from people in different states describing their own, Brad's, individuals who used HOA positions to engage in harassment and intimidation. 1 month later, Jason joined a youth advocacy program that paired therapy with community service. The group, composed of teenagers who had experienced various forms of trauma, worked on projects to support each other and educate the public. Jason helped create a website called Know Your Rights, HOA Edition, that provided resources for families facing harassment in their communities. At the 1-year mark, our neighborhood held a community picnic, a celebration of resilience and new beginnings. The new HOA board presented official changes to the covenant. Security would be handled by licensed professionals only, all enforcement personnel would undergo background checks, and a resident oversight committee would review all complaints and citations. As families gathered on the community green, I watched Jason playing frisbee with friends, laughing in the sunlight. He still had moments of anxiety, still attended therapy, but the haunted look had faded from his eyes. Helen Garcia approached me, offering a plate of homemade empanadas. "Your son looks happy." "He is getting there," I said. "We all are." "You know," she said thoughtfully, "before all this happened, we were just houses near each other, not neighbors. It took something terrible to make us a community." She was right. People who had once hurried past each other now stopped to chat. Residents looked out for each other's children. Weekly community events drew large, engaged crowds. The final chapter of the Brad saga came with his sentencing, 8 years for the combined charges. The judge's words were unequivocal. "You used fear to control an entire community with particular focus on its most vulnerable members. The court views this as a profound breach of trust and a danger to public safety." As we left the courthouse, Jason turned to me. "Is it over now?" I put my arm around his shoulders, noticing he had grown taller over the past year. "That part is over, but what we built from it is just beginning." That evening, we sat on our front porch swing, something that would have earned a citation in the Brad era for being non-conforming exterior furniture. Neighbors waved as they walked by. Children played freely in front yards. The community felt not just safe, but alive. "Mom," Jason said quietly, "I am thinking about running for the youth position on the HOA board next year." I looked at him surprised. "Really, after everything?" He nodded, a determined glint in his eyes. "Because of everything, someone needs to make sure it never happens again." I smiled, pride swelling in my chest. We had moved to Sycamore Heights seeking a fresh start after years of difficulty. We had found terror, trauma, and betrayal instead. But ultimately, we had also found something unexpected, true community, real justice, and a strength in ourselves we never knew existed. The man with the fake badge was gone, and in his place, something authentic had finally emerged.